So, moving on to our panel. We've heard a little bit about the market trends. Now let's ground some of this discussion into reality. We want to really bring two speakers today. We've got Korab from Puma Property Finance and Dominik from Kaufland. I'd like to invite you up to our panel discussion. But really, these two players represent the UK market and the European market. And are here really to represent both the investor and the end user side of the EDGE certification program, and can really give some insight into what has certification enabled both of these players to achieve. We are missing one microphone, so I'm not sure how we're going to do this. I might come off the microphone and pass the microphone for Dominik to share. So maybe we'll start with Dominik. Maybe you can introduce Kaufland and introduce the journey into sustainable real estate, how you started and what you were looking to do in Kaufland.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Dominik. I'm a part of the grocery chain Kaufland. We are Germany-based. We operate 1,650 stores, majorly in the CE and SE region. And we are part of the Schwarz Group, Germany-based, biggest grocery chain in Europe. I think third or fourth one in the world. But coming back to the real estate part and sustainability, our group and our company decided about approximately around 2020 to fix all those things what we already done, and in terms of sustainability, and figure out how should we put our strategy for the future. So, and every department, purchasing department, real estate department, got the tasks and figuring out how to cut CO2 emissions. And we already heard it, the real estate department, ours is quite massively producing CO2 emissions. And then we decided how should we cut them down and how should we handle that. About 2 years later, we signed the SBTi as a group, being net zero by 2050. And so we had to start working. And then we decided, firstly, we have to collect the data, what's there, how do our real estates look like. And there, EDGE came into play, because it's an amazing tool, especially for such a big portfolio what we have, managing over 1,600 stores. Nowadays, at the time it was a bit less, to figure out where to start and what to take care about. And I took over this project about 2022, 2023, and since that we now have about 1,100 certificates throughout our entire portfolio, including the supermarkets, plus the warehouses, plus the headquarters. And so this is one of the parts. I will dive a little bit deeper in the details if needed.
Absolutely. So I think this gives a little overview of the work that you've done. I think maybe one question was, what was the initial driver for even starting to sign the SBTi, and how did you get that buy-in internally? Because obviously the results speak for themselves in terms of the impact of the portfolio, but that's a huge initiative that takes many years, many resources to ultimately do. So where did the drive come from internally?
The reason why I said we are such a big company is not to say how big we are. It is because we have responsibility. So we are Kaufland, we are Lidl within the group, we are sister companies, we have a big digitalization company, we have the production, we have ships, we have paper mill, we have pasta production, bread, and all that stuff that's very energy consuming. So we thought, how can we take care of our responsibility? How can we cut down our CO2 emissions? And the second pole is the grocery business is quite competitive. So it's in our DNA to look very closely into lean processes and to cut down costs. And we see sustainability not as, of course there are, but we really focus on what brings us benefit, and also what are investments into a proper real estate portfolio, into how we work together with farmers and so on. So it's quite versatile. And if you have this mindset, not seeing as a lot of others seeing sustainability just as a cost and things that you have to spend money for, then it's quite hard what we expected. So we see what we do as an investment, and the edge is the tool to figure out, one of the tools to figure out where should we do investments. And one is, for example, in our case, heat recovery in the AHUs, or we already have since 2012, all of our newly built stores just have electricity. So we use the waste heat of our refrigerating system to heat and cool the supermarkets. But we took over in the last 5 years in Germany 125 old stores. So how to refurbish all those and where to start. So heat recovery is one part. Changing gas to heat pumps and so on. So Edge helps therefore to find the right trajectory for that.
Fantastic. I have more questions for you, but I want to bring Dee in. So Dee, you're coming from a very different perspective. So can you introduce Puma Property Finance and the work you're doing with the impact?
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'm Dee Korab. I'm the head of impact at Puma Property Finance. Puma are a development finance lender in the UK. So we fund new build and retrofit of all asset classes really, and with a UK focus. One of the things that's quite important to us as a business is that we have a strong higher up. Okay. We have quite a strong focus on impact, and it's important to us as a business to be able to support the developers that we work with, and also incentivize really best-in-class outcomes across sustainability and social impact. So the way that the framework that we put together to deliver that was our impact lending framework, and we linked the sustainability angle to EDGE certification. So we would effectively say to developers, if you build your assets and are able to meet either EDGE or EDGE Advanced, we will provide fee reductions on your loan accordingly. So, and they were quite substantial, they're market leading, they're much more than the traditional green loans that banks provide. And what we found is that it's been a really, really good tool, and in terms of engaging the developers that we work with and really seeing like change within development in general.
And what kinds of asset classes are you looking at? What's been the market response? Are these clients that weren't doing sustainability that are now doing it, or are they looking for ways to verify the impact? So in terms of the question was, what asset classes are we looking at, and has it changed the way that developers are developing? So it's across asset classes. Actually, one of the reasons that we chose to go with EDGE above other building certifications was that this is something that can be applied equally to a care home as a office building, for example. And that was really important because we're working with very, very diverse developments and developers, whether that's a small-scale family-run business all the way up to a sophisticated developer that's focused on and experienced in retrofit. So we really wanted something that fit across the whole spectrum. We've definitely seen it driving changes in behaviour. So when I get into a conversation or talk to a CFO or a treasurer within an organisation, within a developer, and say, actually, here is the financial incentive that's on offer, and for us it's between 0.5% to 1% off the exit fee that we provide. So it's really substantial in the context of what can be quite a large development number. All of a sudden the question that gets asked is, what do we have to do? And so it's a really different dynamic to previously saying, yeah, it would be really nice if we could get, X, Y, and Z, or we want the building to be more sustainable. Now the treasurers are turning around within their own organisation and saying to the design teams, you need to figure out what you need to do, but we need to get this
this certification level, and that actually flows onto the sustainability teams and the design teams, because they'll be saying, well, we wanted to do that anyway, but the focus was on cost, so we've changed some of our decisions. But all of a sudden, now actually the cost discussion is the other way, which is just do what needs to get done. So that's a really nice dynamic to be able to drive.
Fantastic. I mean, Dominik, are you seeing that from investor side? How much has finance played into Kaufland's decisions, and what is that dynamic between design and kind of the financial team?
So the financing is done by our corporation, but what we see is, and as you explained, what we do at the moment, we're doing forward lease. So we're building newly state-of-the-art Kauflands, and we're selling it to investors. And what they're asking for is sustainable certificates for the buildings. And we try to provide it to them as edge in this case. What we saw or see during this project using edge, not so much in Germany, but more in CNE and the SCE market, is that we gain margin reductions with the financing of the products. And this is, in case of the number of the stores, what we have, quite interesting. So it's also, there are several layers in this project. What we have, it's beneficial to, not so much to the customers, because they usually don't so much understand. We try to put it some journey in some nicer market. So because if you have a market from 1970, which is refurbished, but you stand in front of that and you can't see any PV and something like this, the customers usually don't get the journey to that. So we have some nicely built newly stores where we have some measurements where you see how much the PV on the roof is producing an energy, and then you see it's fancy and shiny. And then we try to do it a little bit for the customers. But at the end, we are like this, or like when we have talks to our investors, keeping the relationship up. We promote and tell them that our entire portfolio is now EDGE certified, the portfolio of the part of the 1600 what we own by ourselves. We have other products as well, but the entire portfolio is certified with EDGE. And this is a good reputation within the market and helps us in several ways to showing the market how experienced we are in this topics.
So one of the things we want to talk about is the scalability. And I think, Dominik, your example of over 1,000 assets going through this process are such a great example of what is possible. So I'm going to ask what everyone's thinking, I hope, which is, was it hard? And how did you do it for so many buildings?
I'm laughing because I took over the project after my colleagues started half a year ago, and said it's easy, no problem, it's a run through. That's one of the lessons I learned in my life. If a colleague telling you that, it's either they don't get the problem yet or they are lying. So I don't know what it was, but it was much more work than we expected. So in my team, we are 15 in the first layer, and then we have some planners because you have to measure a lot of things. Sometimes we do it also externally. So it's a lot, yeah. But it took us just, I think, about 3 years to get those a little bit over 1,000 certificates, and none of us in my project team is doing it as it's not the only job what we do. So we just doing it as a side project. What is helpful for that? We have a structured system in the back mostly. Sometimes we had to go into the cellars and looked up some really dusty shelves and figuring out some plans. But the speed what we had in this, I think it was really, really good. So it was more than we expected, but it is really, really manageable. And I'm not an engineer or something like that, so I've studied something different. And we can do it without any big experience. We have our team in the back who can help us out with the technical questions, but it's really manageable.
And how much did that process play into the decision of using EDGE?
That's the one. Because let me just try to explain it in a German way. So with cars, there is the Mercedes S-Class, that's maybe the German thing, the DGNB, which is nice and fancy, but maybe a little bit too much in that. Then you have maybe this E-Class, C-Class thing with the Brougham and the Elite. And Then you have the A class within this, and it's the Edge portfolio, the Edge certification. Everything what we needed is in there. Yeah, for sure we did some BREEAM certifications as well to dive a little bit deeper into it. But it's very costly, and if you calculate 1,000 certifications, doing it with the other products, it's not possible. So we are just working for certifications, and we can't do that. And getting the information out of the Sintali, of the Edge certification is actually what we needed, because we wanted to see how are our different stores within the decades where we built them, where do we have to make changes, and what changes are the big ones, where are the low-hanging fruits, and Edge really helped with that.
Fantastic. Dia, I want to take your perspective now from the flip side of the investor looking at these assets, looking at what to invest in. How do you use the data from the certificates, and how would you look at what one of your clients is doing in terms of sustainability for decision making?
It's a good question. I think if we go back to why we needed certification to begin with, we were really keen to come up with some sort of a green loan product, or some sort of a system in which we could say, actually, you're doing the right thing. We want to play our role within this entire system. We have a responsibility as a provider of capital to try and incentivize behavior. But it wouldn't be enough for me to sit in a finance office somewhere and say, yeah, that seems like a green building. Like it's not measurable, it's not comparable, it's not fair to developers. So what you really need is something that's measurable, that's external, that's like held. I can rest, I know that someone else who knows what they're doing is auditing this information. It's not just the client giving me some information and saying like it's all good. It's been checked. So from that perspective, it really is quite valuable. What was the second part of your question?
No, I think that answers it. But I guess in terms of, maybe you can walk us through the first example that has been actually certified through the impact loan, and also how the data, does that then feed into your own reporting, or how do you pull the data from the Edge certificate?
Yeah, sure. So at a high level, I'm sure you guys are going to go through exactly what Edge is, but my simple description is you've got 3 metrics, and this is really handy for when you're actually talking to clients. So for us, we're looking at, and I can talk to our own investors and say, these are the metrics that we're tracking across all of our impact loans. So that's energy efficiency, that's embodied materials, that's water usage. And so the metrics are really, really clear. They're on the certificate. There's only 3 numbers. You don't need to be an expert in greens, like in sustainability or anything to understand them. They're just there. The first example, in terms of your question, just to go back 1 second around scalability, for us, it's been really, really successful and really popular among clients. So we funded 420 million pounds worth of development targeting our impact lending framework, and the vast majority of that is linking to Edge. That's across 24 developments and ranging across a vast range of asset classes, etc. The first care home to be certified in the UK was certified under the ILF. This is Cedar Lodge Care Home. You can see it looks like quite older building, which it is at the front. It was a retrofit and expanding the care facilities at the back. And I think the really cool thing is you can see on the side that it delivered 42% lower energy use, 20% lower water use, 43% lower embodied carbon than a standard new build care home in the UK. That's really clear. Really, at a high level, I can straight away say, yeah, that's green, like that's good, and it's setting the standard really. And so, for example, in this case, it was really, really good for our client. They're very proud to have delivered the first one, and it also sets the standard for their competitors, because within the industry, they're kind of saying, well, this is now best in class. So that's what we want to deliver as well. So it's driving not just this client, who, by the way, has a whole pipeline of assets. So they start with one and then they say, actually, we're going to roll out these changes across our entire portfolio, not dissimilar to yourselves. But it spreads across the industry as well, because then the competitors are saying this is something that we need to be doing as well.
Absolutely. And again, I'm going to ask what I think maybe some of the audience might be thinking about, which is we're in the UK and Edge is fairly new in the UK. So what made you choose Edge for the impact lending framework? And how did that discussion go with your clients? Because I imagine you had to make a decision, but you also had to convince clients like Zephyrix to also come aboard.
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of people in the UK hadn't heard of Edge in a development perspective. If they were already chasing or going for sustainability credentials, they were using some other certifications. And so that was, and sometimes is a discussion point at the beginning to get people familiar with what this is. But fundamentally, the decision was made because one, the three numbers are really, really simple to understand, are a good reporting tool and a really simple, measurable outcome. But also it's very accessible, and that's what we were conscious of. We didn't want to create a financial product that is incentivizing people to do something, but the cost of delivering that is so high that any benefit that we're providing is eaten away by the additional work, the additional cost of certification, all of the rest of it. So this is something that's really accessible. There's also a free tool, which is very, very helpful in terms of having discussions with developers, because it's a low friction, easy way of testing a development at the beginning. It's something that they can log into, they can run it themselves, they can say, okay, how close am I to this? How difficult do I think this is going to be? Or at least get a feel for what's involved and how difficult it's going to be before they commit, as opposed to another certification where actually you have to commit to it. You get quite far down the line before you get any sort of indication of where you're landing. So I think that's quite important for clients as well.
So I guess for both of you, I think Dominik, you alluded to it in terms of lessons learned. Don't trust your colleague if they say it's easy. But what have been your lessons in terms of implementing Edge and kind of taking on this program? Both of you have been working on this for years, depending on the time frame. So looking back and looking ahead about what the future of the portfolios and your clients look like, what do you think are important lessons to take going forward?
What we've learned is one major thing, water. So we made implementation. So for example, the Edge standard is within our building construction description. So we implemented everything, and what we saw is we are seeding a lot of ground and soil, and so we usually be at 6,000 to 10,000 square meters of plots. And if you have a standalone, and then with the parking space, you seal a lot. So we are testing at the moment, for a time now, plasters where the rainwater is going through, and we're trying to collect it. We're trying to collect more rainwater. We're testing it also nowadays for the flushing. So these are lessons learned. What we had with this. What you described is it's so easy to get out of the app, because it's just energy, water, and building materials, and it's really easy to understand, even though if you're not an engineer or something like this. And this information, what you gain out of it, is very easy to bring to your C-level and trying to bring some decisions or changes in there. And if you're then in a company which by itself has some drivers in there, being more sustainable and also trying to getting into the next step with more recycling materials and closing the loops and credit to credit, then you have something special there. And this is what we see, and we ask ourselves the question, what do we do when we are done with certifying? We don't know it yet, but the journey must go on, and so we figure out how to get into the next steps.
Adalberto will tell you in the next presentation.
In terms of a lesson for us, I think engaging early And that's on the developer side. So being really clear about the metrics that we're setting earlier on. And actually, as I'm talking, it might not actually be that bad, but an example that comes to mind for me is a developer where we started the discussion on this a little bit later on in the design process. A lot of things were locked in. By the time they input everything into the app and they worked out, okay, well, we can still change this, we can still change this metric, we can swap out the faucets, these are the things that we can do, but it's a little bit too late on some of the structural elements. And they did make the changes that they could, but they couldn't do enough to reach the certification. Whereas if we'd engaged a little bit earlier, they would have. The reason I'm saying this isn't such a bad thing is because actually that same developer then came back to us on the next one, on the next development, and said, actually, now that we know what's required, we've changed our design. And actually, this is a standard design that we use. We roll out, we build this type of asset, and when we're done, we go and we build the exact same type of asset, the exact same building design. And so they managed to change their entire building design for their program going forward and came back to us like quite smug, saying we meet it now. And actually, that's the point, right? It's to drive change.